It showed Europe without Belgium and the Netherlands. So sea level rise is going to produce enormous changes to low-lying areas of the world and inevitably migrations that will result. Some estimates have put the number of migrants from climate change at 500 million to even 1 billion people. Where will they go? Who is going to receive them? How do we allocate responsibility for taking these refugees in to other parts of the world? The ethical issues related to that are fundamental. And also we saw the high cost of adaptation. Even if the costs of doing nothing are higher, it's still going to be very expensive. The economic stresses and strains of the transition are going to be fundamental. And again, the poor are the ones who can't afford to make the changes. They're the ones who have the least resilience, the least possibility to adjust. So in terms of the economic costs, this is the rising cost of natural disasters over the last 4 decades, steadily increasing. The reinsurance industry, they did Swiss Re, Munich Re did a report recently with UNEP where they calculated that the annual cost of climate change could be $130 billion a year in risks for them to cover in the next 10 years. And yet this has already been depassed by the events, for instance, in 2005 in the US with Katrina and Rita that cost over $200 billion in damages. So already we're seeing the economic effects of this process. And then the Stern report, again, we've seen the figures from that report and what this means to the global economy of doing nothing. So this is already, economics can't deal with the problem. It's been the greatest market failure in history. We're not getting the right signals from the economic system to be able to respond in time. And of course, this is all driven by the cheap energy. We have built our whole civilization on cheap fossil fuels. We've had a sort of a hidden subsidy from the environment that solar energy stored hundreds of millions of years ago. Over a very period of time, we're now drawing out within 200 years. And it's given us the opportunity to develop this fantastic civilization. Just flip on the light switch and anything happens. You jump in your car and you go anywhere. Hop in a plane, you go anywhere. But we've been able to do it because we had a short-term, cheap subsidy that is now vanishing. And while energy demand is still increasing, our civilization has an inertia and a momentum to keep wanting more and more energy. And the Chinese demand today is phenomenal. The supplies aren't there anymore. The supplies are already diminishing, and that's why we see the price beginning to go up so rapidly. So climate change isn't the only reason to address this problem, but it's certainly a fundamental one, requiring us to give it an urgency it may not have had before. And when you think of how dependent we are on those fossil fuels, it's not going to be easy to break our addiction to all of these things. Just every aspect of our lives, from synthetic clothing to the forms of transport, the whole global population of the world is dependent on our agricultural miracles, these enormous plains of corn and wheat and so on, produced with our machinery, with our tractors, transported, with our trucks, with our boats and so on around the world. All of this is dependent on the subsidy from cheap fossil fuels. And we have, 80% of our present energy use comes from fossil fuels, which we have to stop burning if we're going to stop global warming. The world population has grown 6-fold, from 1 billion to 6 billion people, in the same time that this fossil fuel production has allowed us to develop this industrial support. Can we maintain the world's population without that subsidy? What do we do if the tractors aren't running, if the fertilizers can't be manufactured, if the food can't be shipped to those who need it? All these great urban areas, the world has become urbanized. Half the world's population lives in cities. Cities depend on the imports of food, on the imports of energy, on removal of their wastes. Can they continue to function? Are they like appliances that are unplugged? What can you do with a washing machine with no electricity? Keep potatoes in it, perhaps? We really have to look at how vulnerable our civilization has become to the changes that inevitably must come in the few decades ahead. And of course, the planners always assume we're going to burn every last drop of oil and every last lump of coal before we have to go to something else. But do we really want to? We've seen from climate change we can't afford to wait. We can't afford to remove all that carbon from the ground, and then what do we do with it afterwards? We need to leave it there to avoid climate change. So there's this fundamental contradiction between our present society and the scientific realities of the moment. The UK Met Office said, as we already heard also, the biggest obstacles to the take-up of technology such as renewable sources of energy and clean coal lie in vested interests, cultural barriers to change, and simple lack of awareness. We're the ones who are responsible.